Hey everybody, good evening to you. It's Tuesday, May 21st, and it looks like we are at day 27 of the Chad Daybell trial. Welcome to Courtroom Insider. I'm Nate Eaton, coming to you live from Ada County, Boise, Idaho. Beautiful day today, nice and sunshiny. Apparently it's supposed to rain tomorrow a lot, and I left my umbrella at home, so let's hope that I'm covered, at least in the morning. It's so good to have you with us here tonight. We're going to break down what happened today in the Chad Daybell trial. More defense witnesses called to the stand. We've now heard from more defense witnesses in this case than any other case associated with these alleged crimes. Between Lori's trial and this trial, we have heard from 8 witnesses over 2 days. So they're really going through these witnesses. Here is who we heard from today. Joseph Murray, Chad Daybell's son-in-law, husband of Emma Murray, was back on the stand today. Of course, he finished yesterday before we left. He was back up for cross-examination. Then we heard from Dr. Kathy Raven. She is a forensic pathologist, and she has a differing opinion from Dr. Eric Christensen, the guy who did the autopsy on Tammy Daybell, as far as how or the manner of death for Tammy Daybell. We'll talk about that. We heard from Regan Price. She is a neighbor of Chad Daybell. They played a little recording she had with the police, and we'll discuss that along with Asmir Karwick. I apologize, Mr. Karwick, because I know I said your name wrong. I'm sure of it. He works for the Attorney General's office in Idaho. He was an investigator in the early days of the case. And Detective Rick Schmidt with the Rexburg Police Department. No longer a detective. He's retired, but he was called to the stand. All of these people called by defense attorney John Pryor, because we are in the defense phase of this case. The prosecution rested last week. We're now in the defense phase. The prosecution called 67 witnesses, and several were called back to the stand twice. I don't think John Pryor is going to call 67 witnesses. As I said, we're at number 8, so we will see how many more he decides to call. First of all, a little bit of news out of the case. Do you remember this guy from a few weeks ago? Remember him? He is an attorney from Mountain Home, Idaho, just down the road from here, about an hour away, who filed that motion to intervene on 11:45 on the Friday before the case. He said that he represented Chad Daybell, that he was worried that the case wasn't ready for trial. There was typos galore. He misrepresented who he was. He had the wrong case number on there. It was quite a thing. And then he asked for a hearing in front of Judge Boyce. I don't think I've ever seen anything like it. I know attorneys who have practiced law for a long time, and they say they've never seen anything like it, where the judge basically said, you screwed up. You are wasting our time, and I'm going to sanction you. This attorney was Terry Ratliff. We covered it. You can go back and watch it. Well, the judge has issued an order imposing those sanctions. This came down the 20th, yesterday afternoon, around 3:30. I want to read it with you. Can you see it here? On March 29th, Attorney Terry S. Ratliff filed a motion purporting to intervene in the above-captioned case and moving the court for a continuance of the scheduled jury trial. Pause right there. What does it mean? He filed this motion saying that the trial needed to stop. It needed to be continued or rescheduled, delayed, postponed, because he wanted to intervene in the case. The court ordered him to show cause, and a hearing took place on April 18th. At the hearing, the court determined that Rule 11, Idaho, Rule 11, applied to the filed motion and had been violated, requiring the imposition of a sanction. The court determined that the appropriate sanction was the payment of attorney fees incurred by the parties in dealing with the motion, and requested that the attorneys submit their fees for review. The court has received counsel's memorandum of costs. Therefore, the court makes the additional findings of fact and conclusion of law. And then here's a little background. Terry S. Ratliff is an attorney licensed by the Idaho State Bar. On March 29th, 2024, at 11:42 p.m., Friday night, 11:42, right before the trial's jury selection is supposed to begin on Monday, Mr. Ratliff filed an error-filled and frivolous pleading in the above-captioned case. Mr. Ratliff held himself out as attorney for defendant in the caption of the pleading, and in his signature on both the pleading and the pleading's certificate of service, that's what he said. Mr. Ratliff is not and has never been the attorney for the defendant in this case. This pleading falsely and materially misrepresented the fact. The pleading filed by Mr. Ratliff required a response from the court and counsel for both parties on the eve of a major trial. The pleading caused the parties to unnecessarily divert resources and time in responding and unnecessarily increased the cost of the litigation in this case. At the April 18th hearing, Mr. Ratliff was given a reasonable opportunity to respond. He offered no plausible explanation for the misrepresentation that he was the defendant's attorney. He told the judge he was stressed, he was worried, it was a mistake, it was a Scribner's error. He did it 3 times. The court determines that the pleading violated Idaho Code 11 and that the rule applies in this criminal case. And then he goes on to say, counsel for the defendant has submitted documentation that he spent 3 hours addressing the frivolous pleading, including attending the hearing on March 18th. John Pryor's normal hourly rate is $350 an hour. The court finds that both the time claimed and hourly rate are reasonable, resulting in attorney fees of $1,050. The state of Idaho spent 2.75 hours addressing the pleading. The fees for the state of Idaho are $65 an hour, total of $178.75. Let's just pause right there and divert for a minute. Look at the rate disparity between those. If you practice private counsel, private attorney in Idaho versus public servant versus a prosecutor. Prosecutors don't make much here. Public defenders don't make much here. The money's where judges honestly don't make much here. The money is where when you're in private practice. Pryor can set his rate. It's $350 an hour. The state charges $65 an hour. So the state, out of all this, they put in about the same amount of time, $178. Pryor gets over $1,000. The court finds the state's request is reasonable in both hour and time. Additionally, we're going to scroll down. The court has considered whether its own time spent on the pleading should be added as well, and has determined that the sanction of time from both parties suffices as a reasonable and adequate sanction. Therefore, the court sanctions Mr. Ratliff a sum of $1,228.75. So he added the two together. So Ratliff has to pay $1,000 to Pryor, $178 to the state, and then has sanctions of $1,200. Don't file a pleading if you don't have a reasonable explanation. So that kind of wraps up that. He has to pay him within 30 days of this order, which was dated yesterday. What we don't know and what has not been unsealed, as far as I know, I haven't been able to find it, is Mr. Ratliff's actual pleading, like what he actually said in it. So I don't know what will if that would imagine that would have to be unsealed, but I'm sure the judge is keeping it under seal just till this trial is over. So there's the update on that. Now, the update on today. Yesterday I told you how it was packed. There were so many people didn't get in. Today was not as many people, but they were there early. This was the shot. 4:30 this morning. The first guy got there this morning at 4:05. He was from Provo. He's right there. He's a guy. He has a little hat on. He had on a headlamp. He was reading. Very nice dude. We talked. I went over around 5:30. Got some Starbucks for our friends that were there in line from Court TV and some of the other ladies. This was the shot around 5:30. You can see I'm kind of back there picking up my backpack. People were there waiting to get in. And then we had people who will do anything to get to the courthouse. They rode their bikes. They rented bikes and scooters, all bundled up with blankets, camp chairs. I don't know where these ladies parked, but they rode their bikes on down, got in line. This was probably closer to 6. And the courtroom was not completely full today, but it was close. So I mentioned last night, if you really want to guarantee a view of the trial, pick up your phone or go to East Idaho News and you can watch it all day. Today was an interesting day, too, because we had some breaks. We had more breaks than usual, and we got out early because of they just buzzed through the witnesses. So I want to kind of take what we've learned so far from these witnesses. Joseph Murray was on the stand yesterday and continued on today. We went back to October 9th of 2019. That's the night Tammy Daybell showed up in the pickup in the Dodge Dakota from her church activity where they made some freezer meals. She got out and the gunman showed up in her driveway. John Pryor, from the beginning of this case, has made a deal over whether it was a paintball gun or whether it was an actual legitimate firearm, an AR-15. Joseph Murray said that he was chopping wood. He lives kitty corner to the Daybells, which is not super close if you've been out there. I mean, these are large land plots, but close. And this is what he said he was doing that night when Tammy Daybell was shot at. Remember, he was one of the people who called 911. Tammy called 911 and Joseph called 911. Chad did not. Here was Joseph's testimony about that night.
Do you recall what you were doing on that day?
May I ask what time of day? Is there a particular time?
In the evening hours.
In the evening hours, okay. In the evening hours, I was out in the shed behind my house, chopping wood for our fireplace.
Okay. Did anything unusual occur shortly thereafter?
While I was out in the wood shed chopping, I got a notification on my phone that Tammy, my mother-in-law, Tammy Daybell, had posted in the local Facebook group saying that somebody had attempted to shoot her with a paintball gun. And so I went inside to talk with my wife and asked her if she had seen the she'd seen the message as well. And she said she hadn't. She called Tammy, and I asked her because it was on speakerphone, I asked, did you call law enforcement? And she said no. So then I made a phone call to law enforcement at that time.
Was that prior to talking to Tammy about the incident?
That I called?
Yes.
It was after.
So you spoke to Tammy before you called 911?
Correct.
And do you recall, without saying what Tammy said, what the nature of the conversation was about?
She said that.
No, I don't want you to say what she
sorry.
said.
So the conversation was of the nature that she or Emma had tried to figure out, what was going on. And she had told, or during that conversation, it was brought up that the person that had shot at her.
Objection, hearsay, Your Honor.
Sustained.
Did you ever get any indication of the type of weapon that was used during this encounter?
Objection,
Answers
calls for
you.
hearsay, Your Honor.
Sustained.
Okay. At some point then, after discussing the case with Tammy, was your wife there as well?
Yes. And in the Facebook post that she had written, it specifically said.
Objection, calls for hearsay, Your Honor.
She said that it was a paintball gun and that it had something up on top similar to a paintball gun.
Okay, so again, the paintball gun theme. Pryor really trying to, I don't know if create doubt is the term, but at least make people think that maybe it was indeed a paintball gun, not an AR-15. And we talked about last night, why is the truck such a big deal? Did Chad drive it? Did Tammy drive it? Pryor has suggested, and through some of his witnesses, I think, that Chad was the driver of that truck, and that Tammy only drove it occasionally. And because of that, if Chad was the driver, maybe the shooter intended to go at Chad rather than Tammy. And he asked Joseph about the truck, who was driving the truck. And Joseph said that Tammy used to drive the truck, and then they got the other car, and she started using the Chevy Equinox, and Chad would drive the truck, and that he had to go to Tammy for the keys to the truck because she drove the truck to school that day, the day before she died, because he needed to go help a friend with potato harvest. But really, both parents kept both sets of keys for both vehicles. They didn't keep both sets of keys, but they had keys for each vehicle. Both of them kept that. Joseph testified that he never heard swooshing, like a swoosh noise, or a screaming from Tammy, testified that he didn't hear anything like that. Here's a little bit more of what he had to say kind of about the truck and about what happened that night. Here you go.
And the vehicle, if we were to go back to late 2018 until late 2019, when you were provided that vehicle, who was the primary driver of the 2004 black Dodge Dakota?
During which time, sorry?
2018, late 2018, let's say November, December of 2018, to the time you acquired it in late 2019. Who was the one primarily responsible for driving the Dodge Dakota?
Chad was
All right, what did Tammy drive?
a black, well, I don't know when they got I think that was when they got the Equinox, because they used to have a blue Dodge Caravan. But then they bought I don't know what year it was, but it was a black Equinox.
Okay. So at some point, it was Tammy who would drive the newer car?
Yep.
And Chad would drive the older car?
Correct.
And whenever you saw Chad travel during his daily visits to the Salem church on a regular basis, it was the black Dodge Dakota that you would see him driving. Is that correct?
Yes, occasionally Equinox, but generally it was the truck.
Now, there was an occasion in October of 2018, which is where I'm leading to, that you had to retrieve keys regarding the black Dodge Dakota. Is that correct?
Correct.
And on Friday of October 18th, were you aware, or did you have any knowledge that Tammy Daybell on that day was involved in preparing for a book fair?
Yes.
Okay. And at that point, she had utilized the black Dodge Dakota. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And did you have to go and borrow that for some reason?
Yes. So that fall, there was a really major issue with like the potatoes freezing. And I was helping my friend who was trying to get their potatoes in. And at the time, my wife and I only had one working vehicle. And I was transporting her back and forth to work. And she was at work and I went to pick her up and I was talking to her about how my friend needed help finishing getting the potatoes in, but we didn't have a vehicle and I wasn't sure how we were going to get her home and be at work because we'd be in two different places. And Tammy said I could use the truck.
Okay.
And she would my wife would take her home.
Now, you described to when you were interviewed, and you were interviewed several times and testified in front of a grand jury. Is that correct?
I wasn't interviewed, but I testified in the grand jury. Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry. That's correct.
Yep.
And at some point during that testimony, you indicated that you needed to go get her keys.
Correct.
What did you mean by her keys?
Well, the keys to the truck.
Okay.
All right. So he says that around the time of the shooting, Chad was the primary driver of the pickup truck. He would occasionally drive the other truck. It just so happened that on the day Joseph needed the truck, Tammy had it at school where she was teaching, and so he went to get the key, or she had the keys, and then Emma testified that Emma took her home. So many of you have written and said, what's the big deal about the truck? Again, John Pryor is trying to say that whoever was the primary driver of the truck, whoever was going to shoot at them, or if there was a target, it might have been Chad, because Chad was the driver of that truck. Rocky Wixom, the deputy Fremont prosecutor, was the one who cross-examined Joseph, and he started off by saying, "Listen, would you agree that the death of Tammy has been a traumatic experience for your entire family?" And he said, "Yeah." And finding JJ and Tylee has been traumatic, and Joseph said, absolutely. He asked if Joseph and Emma have talked a lot about this incident. He said, yeah, of course. Any couple would. He asked if him and his siblings have talked a lot about it. And he said, yeah, not as much as him and Emma, but they have talked about it. And then he went into some questioning about Deputy Coulter Cannon, who testified earlier in the case from Fremont County. And it seems as if Joseph now has an issue with what Deputy Cannon put in the report. When Deputy Cannon was the deputy who responded the night of the attempted shooting in the driveway. he met with the Daybells, he met with Joseph. Remember that other witnesses have testified that after the incident, it appears Tammy went inside and Googled, maybe with the help of Chad, Garth, whomever, potential guns, and found the one online and said, yeah, it was that one. And that's where the expert last week came in to say that a paintball gun and an AR-15 could look similar. You could mistake them for the same gun, especially if you're not, up to date on firearms. So here's where Rocky Wixom kind of questions Joseph about the differences in the stories between the police report that Coulter Cannon took, the deputy, and between what Joseph is saying on the stand now.
You were also asked questions by Mr. Pryor yesterday about having talked to Deputy Cannon
Correct.
back on October 9th when this attempted shooting happened.
Correct.
You had explained that you went into the roadway and met him and gave him some details.
Correct.
And in fact, I think you denied yesterday that you had ever told Deputy Cannon that you had heard Tammy scream.
That is correct.
Likewise, I think you denied that you went over to the house immediately after the scream and didn't see anything suspicious. Is that correct?
That is correct.
So then it's your testimony that Deputy Cannon, if he put that in his report, has it wrong. Is that fair?
That is absolutely fair.
So he has inaccurate information.
That is true.
And I think you tried to explain that away somewhat yesterday by the fact that
Judge, I'm going to object to the characterization, explaining away.
Sustained.
you don't disagree that yesterday on this point, you had explained that when you had met with Deputy Cannon in the roadway, you were quick to give him information because you wanted him to go search.
Correct.
So isn't it possible that whatever you were relaying to Deputy Cannon in that quick interaction, one reason for the discrepancy could be he misunderstood what you were saying?
Possible, but very unlikely.
So you believe he was intentionally inaccurate?
Correct.
Okay. With respect to what you said yesterday about Tammy never having described this paintball gun as anything but a paintball gun, you did testify to that, yes?
Yep.
Isn't it possible that you simply could have been mistaken about Tammy's full description of what happened as you were overhearing and listening to a conversation that she was having with your wife?
Due to the fact that it was on speakerphone, I don't think so.
Well, you said a second ago that it still could have been possible that given the nature of the situation, Deputy Cannon could have been confused by your explanation to him, correct? You just said that.
Yes, but I was also very clear in what I explained to him.
But you don't believe that you're beyond having that same kind of miscommunication if that did occur?
No, based off of the fact that both my wife and I had the same understanding from the
Well,
same
I'm not asking
conversation.
about your wife's understanding. I'm asking you, yes or no. You certainly could have had the same kind of misunderstanding,
I don't believe so.
but you could have, or you simply,
Judge asked and answered.
Sustained.
Okay, so he is saying there that Deputy Cannon misunderstood him, but Joseph, there's no way, Joseph's saying he was crystal clear that the deputy misunderstood him. Rocky Wixom was trying to say, is it possible that he misunderstood you? Joseph Murray says that he intentionally did it. Perhaps there's a misunderstanding on one end or the other. Joseph Murray said, no, it was all on his end. I was crystal clear. There's no way that he could have misunderstood me. It was him. We then go on to hear more about another officer who was patrolling the scene, who we've seen a lot of, Ray Hermosillo from the Rexburg Police. He was driving around the property a lot. He was going slow rates of speed before the children were found, after the children were found. And Rocky Wixom asked Joseph about that, and here's what he said.
you testified also that at some point in time, Detective Hermosillo had been seen driving by this property.
Yep, before and after Chad's arrest.
And that was something that you had observed personally?
Yep.
And at that point, had you met Detective Hermosillo?
Yes.
And that's how you were able to identify him?
Yep. And I've also seen him on Facebook.
Okay.
Um,
Did you see Detective Hermosillo the day that Tylee and Gigi were found?
I can't recall for sure on that day.
You don't have any reason to disagree that Detective Hermosillo was one of the lead investigators in this case?
No, I have no reason to disagree on that.
No reason to disagree that in fact he was there the day that the bodies were found?
I would assume so.
So you wouldn't disagree that for law enforcement to drive back and forth by this property, that they may have suspected the bodies were, and in fact found the bodies there, that wouldn't necessarily be unusual, would it?
Perhaps no. However, this was even after the bodies were taken out, that he would slowly drive by the property.
And to that point, so you would disagree that a detective who discovers bodies on a property, arrests somebody from the property, might have a surveillance or investigative interest in continuing to drive by the property to identify if someone else was coming back to the property after the bodies had removed. You don't disagree with that, do you?
I don't see the reason for it.
You're not a law enforcement officer, are you?
Absolutely not. I would rather choose any other profession.
Okay.
Choose any other profession.
He would rather choose any other profession than be a law enforcement officer. What do you think? What do you think of the testimony? Would love to hear your thoughts. That's kind of where it ended today, and Joseph Murray was released from his subpoena, so we won't be hearing from him again unless they decide to resubpoena him. Next, we had Kathy Raven. She's a doctor. She's a forensic pathologist. She runs a private practice out of California. She's done over 300 cases. She's testified in over 300 cases. Most of them appear to be for defense attorneys, and basically these expert witnesses, just to be honest, as most of them are paid by the defense. You pay them to come in and give their testimony and to give their expert opinion. They're not really connected to the case per se. Some are for sure. But Kathy Raven basically testified. She's done this over 25 years. She's done autopsies. She works for coroners, medical examiners. She reviewed several things that John Pryor sent her, different parts of the autopsy, and she said she believes that Tammy Daybell did not die of asphyxia, like Dr. Eric Christensen, the medical examiner in Utah, said she did. And here is Pryor questioning her about how she thinks the death happened for Tammy, or at least how it should have been ruled.
You came to a conclusion in your report in regards to this case, is that correct?
Yes.
And what was that conclusion?
My conclusion was that since there was no anatomical or toxicological cause of death, no injury to account for death, that it would be best classified as a cause of death as undetermined.
Okay, now when you say no physical cause of death, you did review Dr. Christensen's testimony, is that correct?
Correct.
And there was some mention, at least during this trial, of the bruising on the arms. Is it your conclusion that those bruises could not be taken in consideration to support a different conclusion of asphyxia?
Well, again, the bruising on the arm is nonspecific. They're just bruises on the arm. They don't indicate a cause of death. They don't cause death in and of themselves. They're just nonspecific bruises on the arm. So I don't believe it supports a diagnosis of anything other than there was some blunt injury to the arms.
Okay. And in regards to the suggestion that if someone were to sit on the chest of someone to try to cause asphyxiation, did you examine or look into that possibility?
Objection, Your Honor. Counsel's testifying misstates the prior testimony.
Sustained.
Would it be a possible basis of asphyxiation by suffocation by sitting on someone's chest?
It's a difficult question. It's very difficult to sit on somebody's chest and kill them. There are reports There was one scientific study done back in 2017. I believe it was out of San Diego, where they actually tried to figure out how much weight it would take, how much pressure it would take to do that. Usually when somebody does asphyxiate, it's usually several people on top of somebody, or in a crowd. You've heard of the stadiums where the crowds get stuck and everyone gets pushed together. That's several bodies. It's not just one. This particular study said it would be probably 450 plus pounds that would have to require to sit. So I think it'd be extraordinarily hard to sit on somebody, a healthy young person anyways. Maybe an old febrile person you might be able to, but I think it'd be very, very difficult and unlikely.
So she's saying that the bruises on Tammy's arm aren't necessarily from her death. Remember that Eric Christensen said the bruises were fresh, the doctor that actually did the autopsy, that they were fresh and that she died of asphyxia, likely from being held down. Whether it was a plastic bag over the head smothered with a pillow, we don't know the specifics. We haven't heard that, except that this woman, this expert doctor, this doctor, is saying that she thinks it should have been ruled undetermined. Not homicide by asphyxia, but undetermined. So Pryor had some questions for her, and then Lindsay Blake got up. Before Lindsay Blake got up, though, they talked about she could have possibly had a seizure, arrhythmia, heart arrhythmia could have contributed. She had anemia. What did I write here? Oh, yeah, there could have been a medical thing, even though her heart was healthy and looked healthy, and even though the other doctor said that there was nothing wrong, like, with her brain, and that at least two doctors that did the autopsy, Lily Marsden and Eric Christensen, said that 49-year-old women don't suddenly just develop seizures that kill them, especially because she hadn't had a history of seizures at all. A couple of witnesses this week have testified she would have fainting spells. She started to faint a little bit, but we haven't heard anybody testify that they actually saw Tammy have a seizure. So then Lindsay Blake gets up to cross-examine her, and she starts asking her, did you review this? Did you review this? Did you review this? And for a minute, some of us were thinking, well, why is she mentioning all this? This doesn't have to do with the autopsy. Why isn't Pryor objecting? And eventually Pryor did object. But and the objection was sustained, but here's how Lindsay Blake responded. And I believe this will be a memorable moment for the jurors. At least for the public it was. Here's what happened.
Autopsy report and other pertinent information. It was the defense that provided you that other pertinent information. Is that correct?
The defense provided me everything, yes.
Did you review a report from Lieutenant Powell regarding requesting Walmart records?
That does not sound familiar, but I don't remember.
Did you review a report of an interview with Emily Daybell?
I don't recall.
Did you review a report of an interview with Paul Daybell?
I don't recall.
Did you review a report of an interview with Jana Penrose, a relative of Tammy Daybell?
I don't believe so.
Did you review a report of an interview with David Warwick?
I don't believe so. The name's not familiar.
And you said you reviewed some of the coroner reports. Would that be Brenda Dye? Does that name sound familiar?
It does sound familiar. Like I said, one was not signed. I didn't know who wrote it, but that name does sound familiar.
Did you review an interview that was conducted with Brenda Dye, a report of that?
I believe so, yes.
Did you review a report of an interview conducted with the deputy coroner, Cammie Wilmore?
Yes, I believe so.
Did you review a report that contained some records from a Lolly Time iCloud account?
No.
Did you review a report from Benjamin Dean, an analyst with the FBI?
No.
Did you review the Seasons medical records?
No.
Did you review the Teton medical records?
No.
And I think you indicated you did review some reports of the October 9th incident,
Yes.
and that would have been regarding an attempted shooting of Tammy Daybell. Does that sound familiar?
Yes.
Did you review a report of an interview with Matthew and Regan Price?
I don't believe so.
Did you review a report of an interview with Haley Palmer?
No,
Did you review any reports of interviews with Angela Yancey?
no,
Did you review a report of an interview with Ronald and Phyllis Douglas?
Judge, I'm going to object at this point to the relevance of how that would have an impact on the autopsy. She's going to go down a list of every report that any witness in this case
Mr. Pryor,
discussed.
no speaking objections, please, but I'll sustain the objection at this point unless there's some specific relevance to the autopsy.
And if I may respond?
Go ahead.
I'm reading off a list that was reviewed by the Utah medical examiners in making their findings. I
Okay,
think it is relevant.
all right. If that's the foundation for that, I'll allow that to continue. Thank you, Ms. Blake.
Okay, so all those things she just listed, and probably another minute or so after this clip, she listed everything the medical examiner in Utah reviewed before they determined that Tammy Daybell died of asphyxiation. Pretty impactful moment there. The Dr. Bowen? Dr. Raven, what she reviewed is what was sent to her. I'm not faulting her at all. It's just what John Pryor gave her. He didn't give her all of this stuff. Then we heard, one other thing that got a lot of you talking. John Pryor talked about all this stuff, all of those exhibits that, or all of those documents and reports that the medical examiner in Utah reviewed. John Pryor talked about how, is there such a thing as confirmation bias? Meaning you can read all those things as a medical examiner and in your mind come to an idea or already have an idea of how somebody died. And then when you read all those, you can be like, yep, this proves my thought. This proves it. Yep, it was this. And he asked if there's such thing as confirmation biases with medical examiners on cases they're investigating. And the doctor said, yeah, that does happen. And then after Lindsay Blake finished questioning the doctor, John Pryor got up and said, basically, doesn't that prove that this was confirmation bias? But listen to one of the words he used when asking the question. See if you can pick it out. Many of you did. I tweeted about it, about how he asked this question and the word he chooses to use.
Dr. Raven, Ms. Blake went over a litany of other reports and statements from other witnesses, a variety of other documents. When a forensic pathologist is examining a variety of other documents that are not related to the medical reports and the scientific evidence, is that an example of confirmation bias?
Objection, Your Honor, calls for speculation.
Overruled.
Is that an example of confirmation bias when you take into account all of these other reports, documents, statements of people who are not present at the murder?
So, and it's a difficult question. We don't honestly look at all those reports on any case really I've ever heard of such an exhaustive list, because we don't have those reports available to us. Maybe over a 2-year period, we would have them. I don't know. But we don't. Again, we always base it off scientific evidence, what we have in front of us, the autopsy. Either we have a cause of death or we don't. We try not to speculate. We try not to guess on what a cause of death is. There's lots of implications to that for anybody. So generally speaking, it is bias. If that's what you're using to determine a cause of death for, that's bias. Either you have a cause of death or you don't. And then again, if we had a case like this where we don't have a cause of death, we do just call it undetermined. And we put that list, what we've talked about today, these are potential findings, but we don't commit to one of those.
Okay, so she says, yeah, it could be, but what during the clip, I stretched out my legs and I bumped my camera. I want to make sure my shot's okay. Okay, good. It looks like it is. She said, repeating John Pryor's question, is that an example of confirmation bias when you take into account all of these other reports, documents, statements of people who are not present at the murder? He called it a murder. He didn't say at the death, at the body, at the scene. He said at the murder. Now, so many of you were, oh my gosh, that's a big, smoking gun. Did the jury catch it? To be honest, I didn't catch it the first time. Someone pointed it out to me, and then I pulled up the transcript, and that's what it says. Now, you could take that statement to mean he was talking specifically about Tammy's situation or the overall investigations. Is that an example of confirmation bias when you take into account all of these other reports, documents, statements of people who are not present at the murder? He could have been saying that as a general question or specifically. Bottom line, I don't know if it really makes a ton of difference here, but it is an interesting slip of the tongue, I guess you could say, or something that, he may have just said. Regan Price was the next witness. Regan was a neighbor of Chad, and Regan, she was called by John Pryor because she apparently told the police that she heard gunshots, or one gunshot, around the time of September 9th or before. Sorry, September 19th, I believe, or before. Around this time. Maybe it was the 9th. She didn't know where the gunshots were or when they heard them, but it is clear she went to the police. And John Pryor played a recording of her talking to officers, but we didn't really know which date the recording was from. Actually, he did say it after the fact. It was from June 9th of 2020. And I'm going to be honest, we heard a helicopter overhead during the interview. I think that was us. I think that was me in the helicopter. While Regan Price was talking to the cops. She was telling them that she heard about a gunshot. And then she testified that she joked with Kaya Kamanu that she would take some money to be an informant, and to befriend Joseph Murray. And she basically said she would try to do whatever she could to find the missing kids. And that she clearly joked with Kaya Kamanu about maybe getting paid $50 or something. It was a short testimony. A lot of us were kind of puzzled as to why he called her. And the prosecution had a couple of follow-up questions, but nothing too big. We had a long lunch because the next witness was not coming till the afternoon, and the next witness was Asmir Kararil. He works for the Idaho Attorney General's office, and if you remember back in 2020, the prosecutor at the time in Fremont County was Marcia Murdoch. She asked that the state attorney general take over her portion of the investigation into Tammy Daybell's death and the children. And so she basically asked them to take the case. They did. And that's when this investigator interviewed Melanie Gibb and others, I'm assuming. But then when Lindsay Blake was elected into office, she asked for the case back from the AG, and she took it back. So the AG was involved for a short period of time, and then it went back to Fremont County. Well, Asmir, investigator Kararil, I'm totally butchering the name, interviewed Melanie Gibb. And he said during the interview, it was about 3.5 hours. And Melanie Gibb talked about her religious beliefs, her thoughts, the light, dark scale, all this stuff. And when the interview was over, this investigator testified that they kept talking, and the recorder was off. The tape recorder was off. But he did go to John Pryor and say, listen, this exchange happened. I want to let you know. I want to be transparent. Here's what happened.
Now, at the end of this, and would it be fair to say that this was sort of a teaching to you of her religious theories and beliefs?
For me, it was, since I didn't really understand it, it felt like she was educating me a lot about her beliefs.
Okay. And she didn't say where she got these beliefs from, did she?
No,
Okay. She never told you that Chad Daybell taught her about all of these beliefs, did she?
she did talk in the interview that she heard from Chad and Lori some of the same things that she was mentioning.
Okay. But at no time did she tell you that it was Chad Daybell who taught you about all of these unusual, I'm sorry, Judge, all of these beliefs that she discussed with you?
Not specifically.
Okay. At some point, the interview ended. Is that correct?
Correct.
And then at some point, there was a further discussion that was off the tape, correct?
Correct.
And in all respect to you, officer, you contacted me and told me about that openly, did you not?
I did.
You discussed with me that upon review and being received a subpoena from my office, you discovered that there was a portion of that interview that was not properly recorded, correct?
Correct.
You didn't anticipate that Ms. Gibb would continue to talk to you after the recording was pushed off, did you?
Correct.
Okay, and what was the topic of that discussion?
After the interview was done, it was more because I was curious. Her talking about the scale of light and dark discussion. I believe she mentioned that I was nice, that I was a good person. And so I just asked the question, what did she believe on the scale? Where would she rate me?
And did she respond to you?
She did.
What did she say?
She stated that I was on the light side, that I was so light that I was given this light aura.
And was that something that that she made it? She didn't tell you that was Chad Daybell told her how to do that, did she?
No, she did not.
She did that on her own initiative, is that right?
Objection misstates the evidence.
World.
I have nothing else, Judge. Thank you.
Okay, so obviously the purpose for that was to show the jury that Melanie Gibb believed this stuff and that it didn't come from Chad, although the prosecutor objected and said misstates the evidence. So what else was said in that 3.5-hour interview, we don't know. Did Melanie Gibb say that's where she got it from? And honestly, if you had just spent 3.5 hours talking with someone about this, wouldn't you want to know like where they're rating you? Like, do you think I'm dark? Do you think I'm light? Where's my rating? Where's my score? You know, I'm curious if Chad Daybell has a list somewhere, and am I on it? Are you on it? It'd be great to see, but we haven't seen that list. It was not introduced into evidence. We have never seen the actual list. People I've talked to have seen it. I think I saw a small portion of it. It's hard to remember now, but we haven't seen the full list. After this witness, it was retired Rexburg Police Detective Rick Schmidt, and the whole issue for him being called, according to Pryor, was that during Lori Vallow's trial, he testified something to the effect that when he showed up, it was basically, here's a shovel, go dig. That's kind of what it sounded like he said. Just go dig, and that there was no boundaries, there was no grids, just go dig. He testified that there weren't really any boundaries. He was assigned to the fire pit, and there was the other area, and that it wasn't like, oops, stay in this grid. He also said that when he showed up, he was given a shovel, and his job was to walk the property with a few other agents and just see if there were tender spots in the ground where something could be buried or, something along those lines. And that was it. Short day. We had a long lunch, long break. We had Pryor has more witnesses that'll be on the stand tomorrow, but we finished around 1:30, 2 o'clock. And
You came to
we'll
a
see
So when
who
you
he
say
calls
you-
tomorrow. There are a couple of people that he has said he will call, at least in his opening statement, that we haven't heard from, including Greg Hampikian, the DNA expert from Boise State. There's a data forensics guy he said he was going to call. There's another coroner type person, medical examiner that I believe he said he might call. So we could hear from several more witnesses tomorrow, and then maybe more witnesses on Thursday and Friday. I mean, we don't know how many people he's going to call, but there will definitely be an interesting day tomorrow. Before we go, I want to show this picture of Tammy with her cute little grandson, and she posted this. It's on her Facebook page before she died, and she said, when you match your grandson, and something I think about matching her grandson. So tonight we remember her. A lot of talk about her over the past 2 days, and we remember Tylee, and we remember JJ, and also Charles Vallow. We haven't, the defense has definitely focused so much on Tammy lately that we haven't heard much about the children, how the kids ended up there. He started to go down that road, I think, yesterday a little bit with Joseph Murray, how the driveway was long and that someone could possibly get onto the property without being seen because it was a long driveway, and that the tool shed was unlocked so people might be able to come in and get the tools. But there weren't any dots connected, at least that I could see. All right, yesterday we have to bring in Peggy. You know Peggy. Peggy's our moderator. She helps me every single night. She pulls the questions that you all ask and the shout outs, and she helps kind of keep me on task here. She came to the trial with her husband, Glenn, and I am going to get her on the phone, and she is going to share her thoughts. And then
Hello.
Peggy, hi, we're on live. I hope you know that. I hope you're watching.
I'm aware. I'm aware.
Okay, well, good.
Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you just fine. The whole world can hear you. And
Great.
I was just telling people how you got to come to the trial yesterday with your husband. What were your overall thoughts being in the courtroom?
I did. Okay, so we arrived at the courthouse. It was like 6:25 in the morning. We were already 17 people back. You form a strange bond really quickly with the people that you stand in the line with. So Nate, I can't imagine what you have formed over the last few months and years at this point. There was a man who asked us, my husband and I both, why did East Idaho News go to Boise to cover something? Because it's not East Idaho. And I said, but the crimes happened right in East Idaho in a small farming community. And Nate knows this, and I'm about to tell the world, I live 2 miles from the crime scene, or from where the children were found. And so it's a direct, it's really affected my family, myself, my husband. It was organized chaos to get a seat. I didn't sleep at all the night before for worrying about getting a seat. But I noticed that Judge Boyce runs a very smooth courtroom. The bailiffs and the court staff are remarkable, really. They tell us the rules, they add a bit of humor. I call it dad humor, it was fun. This reminds me, sometimes when the court says they're going to be taking like a 30-minute break, our commenters get pretty riled up when they don't get back into court right on time. And I learned yesterday it's because they've got to get everybody sat back down, go over the rules. And then before court started for the day, Mr. Pryor conversed for a moment with the prosecutor's table. They were very cordial. They smiled at each other. I thought it was nice. They seemed professional but friendly. Nate, I'm just going to stop right here and say, because I'm your moderator, I know you give minute-to-minute coverage, but can I just really tell you to watch you was impressive. And I think you need a shout-out, because I was utterly exhausted at the end of the day, and I did absolutely nothing.
Well, thank you, Peggy. I am just doing my job. You were talking a second ago, and I was showing video from this morning, but I do have video from yesterday. I will say Peggy chose the craziest day to come because it was insane. This is a video. I took it. Oh man, 6:37. It goes all the way around the building. If you can see it, a lot of these people didn't get in.
Yeah.
And then here's another video I'll show you of John Pryor walking in. What did you think? You were there when Pryor walked in and the prosecutors, and there generally is a reaction when people see them walking in. Did you notice that?
Yes, there was a reaction every time he walked in, or every time he walked the hall to go in. Everybody just, oh.
Right.
Did you notice that, Nate?
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of used to it now, but the lady yesterday or today who said, I can't believe I'm here. Today, actually, she was sitting next to me and she said, I've only watched this on TV. It's so weird to be in here and see Judge Boyce in person and see these people, Lindsay Blake and John Pryor.
I forgot that my husband had never seen any of the key players, and so I thought that was really interesting. You know, I didn't realize he hadn't seen Chad in person.
What did you think? What did you all think when you saw Chad?
Well, you know, I was just, I've seen him before. Glenn should speak for himself, but I think he was really surprised by, we were both surprised, I think, by how he just doesn't move. And he doesn't make any expressions, and he just sort of sits there. And to be honest with you, Nate, I kind of thought that you were so busy typing during the days that maybe you didn't notice the emotion, no offense to you. And so I thought, well, I'm going to really stare him down and make sure that, I'm going to watch and see what he does. He doesn't make much movement at all. I did notice he did a little bit when Emma was on the stand. I think you talked about that a little bit last night. But no, he did not move. When Garth was on the stand, there was absolutely nothing. That's one thing I noticed.
Right.
There was very little interaction between Chad and his kids, and obviously courtroom decorum. They're not going to hug and throw a kiss or anything. But I was shocked that there just was very little emotion. And Chad did show some with Emma. When Garth left the table from testifying, from the stand, he never looked at his father, and his father, frankly, didn't look at him. And I thought that was just, now those are just my observations, but I thought that was just sort of, I don't know if it was sad. It just surprised me, I guess.
Yeah.
I will say that Emma clearly loves and supports her father still to this day. I feel that's my opinion, by what she said and how she said it. Mm-hmm. All of the jurors were very engaged. I won't say which one, but there's one that leans clear forward and leans in and engaged himself with what's going on the stand, and I'm really impressed by that.
Yeah.
They were all engaged, but there's just one juror that's very, very noticeably engaged. And then finally, my takeaway is I think Mr. Pryor is doing his job. I think Lindsay Blake is on fire. She is quick to object. She's quick to do so. And then one final thing for the audience that I just want you to know, I have just appreciated your input and the way you behave yourselves for the most part. And I will settle a debate right now. There seems to be, Nate, a big panic over what is catty corner and kitty corner. And that seems to be taking up a lot of space. Let's just say it's diagonal, and catty corner is used mostly in the UK, and kitty corner is used mostly in US and Canada.
There are terms that Idahoans use, I know.
That's true.
And even in the United States, we have a lot of international viewers that you're like, what does that mean? Borrow pit is one. I don't know if that came up in this trial, but I think in Lori's, people were like, what? Or crick, canal.
True, crick or creek, yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So Peggy, by the way, every morning when you go to eastidahonews.com, our YouTube, and you watch the trial, she's in there popping in and out throughout the day. She's the one that makes sure you all behave, that you don't say dumb stuff, and that you are nice to each other. Those are basically the rules. Be nice. And then, again, she helps with the questions and stuff like that. So she has the most... I don't want to say the worst job at eastidahonews.com, but in a way it can be, because I couldn't read comments all day. But she does a good job. So Peggy, would you go back to court? I mean, I know the trial's kind of in the wrapping up phase, but would you go again?
I would, but I have to say, sitting at home and watching it in the comfort of your home is pretty darn good.
Yeah. You can come and go. You can go to the bathroom. Your phone can be on. I'm glad that your phone didn't make a sound.
I was so hyper aware of my phone.
Right. All right.
Well, thank you, Nate.
Peggy, thank you so much. I'm going to go read the questions you just sent me.
Thanks very much, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye. I do want to address something. A few of you have mentioned that you're hearing a humming. The vent for the air conditioner is right above me, and that's probably why you're hearing the wind. And when I switch over to the video clips, it's not on there because I mute. So tomorrow night, I'll try to... This has been going constantly since I got in, and I'm one of those guys... I want my hotel room an icebox. Erica can't stand it. When we go out of town, I want it at 60, well, 65. She freezes. I love it. So I'm taking advantage of a freezing cold room, but I'll try to disable that tomorrow. I realize it is close. I hope you can hear me okay as I've talked tonight. Okay, lots of questions and a couple of shout outs. Let me find them for you. Mary Coons, good to see you. Megan Miller, Joel Heinz from St. George, Utah. Hi, Joel Heinz. Olivia Smith, Stacy Nickerson. We have twins from Adelaide, Australia, turning 11. Elizabeth and Victoria. Good to see you. Thank you for watching. I'm honored that you're watching in Australia. Brittany Zorich, Gil Humphrey from the UK. Angela turns 58 today. Love the birthdays. Kathy Goff, Joe Daly, and Amy Bickle. Thank you, and thank you to all of you all for sending these questions in. Okay, here we go. Kitty asks, why don't they play the calls with the conversations of Emma or Chad? Is this coming in the rebuttal? I don't know, Kitty, if it will be in rebuttal. They obviously haven't played them now. One of the reasons, too, is that there may have been questions that were asked that the prosecution doesn't quite have the clip ready, the call ready, and so maybe that will come down the line. Or maybe some things, maybe they just think it's best to let it lie rather than stir it up. But we'll see if we hear more jail calls coming up. What is voir dire? That means questioning, like interviewing. It's a French phrase which all the jurors undergo voir dire before, like they fill out the questionnaire and then they come in and they say, what are your thoughts? Do you have a problem with the death penalty? Do you have a problem if someone has drastically different religious beliefs than you? It's like interview. Voir dire and native objection is where the prosecutor or the defense objects to something and asks the judge to voir dire, ask questions that will back up whether they should object or whether they should withdraw the objection. So that's why, like yesterday, Lindsay Blake said, do you mind, can I voir dire a native objection? The judge said yes. She asked a couple of questions of Emma, and then the objection didn't carry because she got the answers she needed. I hope that makes sense, and I hope I'm explaining it okay. Can the prosecution play the jail calls on rebuttal? Yes, they can have as long as they have a witness that can testify to it, and as long as it stays within the parameters of what the defense has put on. They can't play something completely unrelated that has not come up in defense. Does Judge Boyce and his court staff reside in Boise, or do they come over from Idaho Falls or Rexburg every week? Judge Boyce lives in Madison County. That's his home base. His staff does too. Or they live in eastern Idaho, I should say. And they don't drive every day, but as far as I know, they're staying here for the trial. Same with the prosecutors, same for the defense attorneys. They may go home on weekends, but this weekend's a longer weekend with Memorial Day, so I imagine they will go back to that, back home. How is Melanie P. related to Lori Pulowski? She's Lori's niece, but through whom? Good question. Let me see if I have my handy family tree. I hope I do somewhere. So Melanie Pulowski her mother died when she was young. And so her mother and Lori are sisters with Summer and Alex and Adam. They're all siblings. So, this family tree somewhere will show you how it looks, maybe. Come on. Okay. I thought I had it here. I swear I posted it. Here it is. This is on my Facebook page, by the way, Nate Eaton Reporter, if you want to go check it out. Melanie Pulowski is right here. We didn't put in the other child, it looks like, but she is. So Alex is her uncle, Summer is her aunt, and so is Lori. So yeah, I hope that makes sense. We have a who's who on our website too that you can look up. Catherine asks if my opinion of Melanie Gibb has changed since the first interview now that I've heard testimony in both trials. In your opinion, has she told the full story? I think I've learned more about Melanie Gibb and her story. I'd love to talk with her again. I I think she was pretty open with me the first time in 2020. There obviously was some stuff that she held onto that I learned about later. The whole truth, I don't know. That's a good question. I also think that time does funny things with our memories. And you know, maybe in 4 years from now, am I going to remember details from today? Probably not. But I'd love to talk to Melanie again. I obviously, the time that I interviewed Melanie, it was May. It was this month, actually. Maybe this week, 2020. The kids weren't found. We did not know a lot. The whole purpose of that interview was to find out what she had to say, and she broke a lot of news during that interview because she knew the inner circle of Chad and Lori so much. I don't think she told me any lies. I don't think she told me, maybe, I think she was honest with me for the most part. And I would interview her again for sure if it came up. I think I've said this several times. I'd love to interview everybody associated with this case again and really try to, figure out where things stand now. Did you catch Mr. Hart, Nate, saying that Lori needed money and Joe Ryan died and she got $50,000 from his death and the kids got Social Security? Do you think there will be any investigation into Joe Ryan's death? I don't think so. I think they would have done it now. Joe Ryan's been cremated. This was from 2018. Lori's in jail for life, prison for life. She didn't know Chad at the time that Joseph died, at least as far as we know. So I don't know, but it does raise some questions for sure. I'm not going to read that one. What would happen for one of the witnesses to get charged with perjury? Ryan asks, can that happen while they're on the stand? I think I kind of explained this last week and John Pryor tried to do this earlier with a witness, I don't remember who, where you try to impeach the witness. Basically, you say there's so many inconsistencies, this witness should be thrown out. Then it's up to the prosecutor to decide if they should be charged with perjury and bring forth the evidence. I don't know if it would happen mid-trial, but I'm not sure all the details on that. Jill, can you advise if the jury was given an overview of who was who in the case before the trial started? No, they weren't. And in talking with Laura, the juror from Lori Vallow's case who I interviewed last week, she said it got confusing. All the people, all the places, it did get confusing. And the fact that these people have multiple names with each other, that can be confusing too. But they didn't get one of these, a map of here's who everybody is, follow along. Nothing like that. The prosecutor has brought in several timelines and kind of a family tree in places. So they've had that, and they could draw it out if they wanted. Were Tylee and Lori barefoot when they stopped and bought the flip-flops after Charles was murdered? Must have left the house quickly or else their shoes got something on them. I think they testified they did leave the house quickly and they didn't have shoes. The shoes were in the house when the shooting happened and they left. And that's why they had to stop and buy the flip-flops. If true crime is not your passion, then what is when reporting? My passion is people, talking to people, sharing stories. I love sharing a good feature story, like a good feel-good story. I don't not hate true crime. I like crime. I like covering crime stories. I love being in the courtroom every day, learning and experiencing stuff. Honestly, crime in a way is kind of easy to report on. It's generally pretty straightforward, formulaic. Not this story for sure. But I like telling all stories. I think I probably said true crime is not my passion. I'm not listening to true crime podcasts all day, every day, and watching the latest Netflix on whatever. I do watch that stuff sometimes, but if I'm going to go to I'm not obsessed with the latest true crime podcast. Nothing against those people who are. And I'm going to CrimeCon next week, so I must like it a little. I just like news. One night on Courtroom Insider, Callie says, I thought you said that Chad has to be found guilty on all charges. And if he isn't, then he's not guilty of any of them. Okay, I don't think I said that. If I did, I misspoke. Chad can be found guilty on some charges and not guilty on the others. He could be found guilty of a mix and a match of all these. It's not all or nothing. What it is the jurors have to be unanimous on the guilty of each one if it's all of them. So every juror, if he's going to be found guilty of first-degree murder for Tammy, every juror has to agree. Same with when it comes to the death penalty on the life in prison or the death penalty. All it takes is one juror to have doubt on, ooh, did he really commit Tammy's murder? Did he really? I don't know. I mean, all it takes is one, and then it doesn't happen that way. So someone just messaged, or someone has a question. Nate just wanted to ask if I've been banned from the East Idaho News YouTube channel. Oh, Joe, this is Joe in Maryland. We should have had you come on with Peggy. She would know. Every night I get an email that Courtroom Insider is now live. I click on the link and listen about your day. Well, thank you. I check my spam folder. It's not blocked, but for some reason I missed about 5 minutes of your video due to the fact I didn't have that link in my email, which takes me right in. Otherwise, without the email, I miss about 5 minutes of the video due to ads on YouTube. Any idea what's going on? Oh, Joe, I don't know. I wish I could tell you. That sounds like a YouTube issue. Normally what happens is I get the same email the second we're live. I open the email, I click on it. An ad does roll, I think, before every single live video. So I guess what I would say is set a little alarm. And what I'll show you, set a little alarm to go off at like wherever you're at, 6:30 Mountain Time. And then when that alarm goes off, go to our YouTube channel. You see right here, this says I'm live, and it's a glorious photo of me rolling my eyes up to the top of my head. But you can go here, live, and the latest live video, we're live right now, will pop up right here. And generally, right at 6:30 or 6:28, I try to go live. Today I was a little late by 2 minutes, I think. Just click that, and it'll work. And then for those of you that haven't subscribed, you can subscribe on our home channel. We've subscribed, so it's taken care of. But I'm sorry that that's happening, and I hope that you can get made sense of that. Melanie asks if we can know the religions of the jurors. Nope, you can't ask the religion of the jurors. I mean, you can assume. You could ask. The court can't. Are you this? Are you that? Are you that? You can't do that. Can't ask based on that. All right, everybody, thank you so much for watching. If you're in Idaho, it's election day. You still have time to vote. It's our primary election today, so a lot of races that people are watching. Tomorrow, be watching here, eastidahonews.com. Here's where you can follow me, my reporter, my Insta, my X, my YouTube, all those places. Appreciate your support more than you'll ever know. Appreciate you thinking about us and watching every day. And tomorrow we'll be back in court at 8:30, and tomorrow back for Courtroom Insider. Another day 29 tomorrow. Is that really true? Feels like it should be day 90, but you know, day 28 tomorrow. Day 28, and I have a couple more pages in my notebook. Gonna have to start a new one. Have a good night, everybody. See ya.